She sat in chains, her lips sealed forever. Her tongue had been cut out, punishment for telling lies. But in her eyes, there was no madness. There was fear, and there was truth. The guards laughed at her, calling her a deceiver. But one human mechanic noticed something strange. Her silence was not empty. Her hands scratched symbols into the cold floor. Symbols that spoke of danger, of a secret no one wanted to hear. Why would they silence her so brutally? What truth could be so powerful that it cost her voice, her freedom, and maybe her life? And why was she staring only at the human, as if he was the only one who could understand? The prison was built of cold stone and steel, hidden deep under the alien city. The air inside was heavy and quiet, filled with the sound of footsteps echoing in the long halls. In one dark corner sat a woman. She looked weak, silent, and forgotten. Her lips never moved, and no words ever came from her mouth. Her people had taken away her ability to speak, saying she was guilty of lies. But when anyone looked into her eyes, they could see something different. They were not the eyes of a liar. They were the eyes of someone holding back a secret too great to share. Yet no one cared. To the guards, she was nothing but a warning. To the prisoners, she was only a mystery. On one particular day, a human named Ethan was brought into the prison. He was not a guard or a soldier. He was only a mechanic, called to repair the broken machines that powered the lower halls. Ethan was young, curious, and careful. He kept his head down, knowing he was only a guest in a place where humans were not respected. But as he walked past the cells, he noticed her. The woman sat perfectly still, her head bent low. At first, Ethan thought she was asleep, but then her eyes lifted and locked onto his. He felt a strange pull in his chest. Her eyes were deep, full of sadness, but also filled with something more, a message he could not yet understand. Ethan quickly looked away and kept walking, but he could not forget her stare. The longer he worked on the machines, the more he felt her presence. When he turned his head, she was still watching him, silently, as if waiting for him to notice something. It was strange. Why him? Why a human, a stranger, someone who had no power here? That night, Ethan returned to the prison to finish the repairs. The guards had grown bored and left him alone for a short time. As he passed her cell again, he saw her hand moving against the ground. Slowly, carefully, she traced shapes into the dust on the floor. At first, Ethan thought they were random lines, but then he noticed a pattern, symbols repeating again and again. He bent down, pretending to fix a wire near the cell wall, and tried to understand. She noticed his attention and pressed her hand harder, making the marks clearer. Ethan's breath caught. These were not random signs. They were warnings. He did not know the full meaning, but he felt the urgency in them. The woman lifted her hand and placed it against the glass of her cell, her eyes never leaving his. Ethan froze. He had fixed countless machines in countless places, but he had never felt something like this. It was as if she was begging him to listen, though she had no voice to speak. He shook his head slightly, whispering to himself that it was none of his business. He was just a mechanic. He was not a hero. He was not even supposed to be here for long. Yet when he tried to look away, he couldn't. Her silence screamed louder than any sound he had ever heard. The guards returned, and Ethan quickly stood up, pretending to focus on his work. But the woman lowered her hand, still watching him. For the rest of the night, her eyes followed him like a shadow, and his heart beat faster with every glance. When Ethan finally left the prison, the image of her face stayed with him. Why had her people taken away her ability to speak? What lie could have been so dangerous? And why did it feel like she had chosen him, out of everyone, to share her secret? That night, Ethan could not sleep. He kept seeing the symbols she had drawn. He sketched them on a piece of scrap metal, trying to copy them from memory. The more he looked, the more he was sure that they were not random. They were a code, a message, something important. Days passed, and Ethan returned again and again to the prison for more repairs. Each time, she was there. Each time, she tried to show him something more. A shape, a sign, a look in her eyes that told him there was danger close. But she could not say it. She had no way to make her truth known. Ethan realized then that maybe everyone else had been wrong. Maybe she had never lied. Maybe she had spoken something her people did not want to hear. And for that, they had silenced her. The thought would not leave his mind. He tried to push it away, but his heart told him something different. This woman, silent and broken, carried knowledge that could not be ignored. A truth heavy enough to crush her, yet powerful enough to save others. And somehow, Ethan knew. She was waiting for him to believe. Ethan returned to the prison again, carrying his tools in a small case. On the surface, it was only another day of work, another set of broken machines waiting to be fixed. But inside, his thoughts were restless. He could not forget the woman's eyes or the strange symbols she had pressed into the ground. The memory of her silence followed him, whispering questions he could not answer. As he walked down the long corridor, he felt the guards watching him. They never trusted humans, and they never let anyone stay longer than needed. Ethan kept his head low, pretending not to notice. But when he reached the lower levels, his steps slowed. He looked toward her cell again. She was there, sitting in the same corner, her body still but her eyes alive. When she saw him, she lifted her hand and brushed her fingers across the floor once more. Ethan paused, his heart beating faster. He crouched near a broken console, his back turned to the guards above. From the corner of his eye, he watched her draw again. This time the shapes were longer, flowing into each other like parts of a map. She pointed toward the ground and then toward the ceiling, as if showing layers of something hidden. Ethan frowned, trying to piece it together. It felt like she was giving him directions, a warning about something beneath the city. He whispered under his breath, "Why me? Why show me?" The woman pressed her hand to the glass, her gaze steady and urgent. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. She did not need words to tell him this was important. Later, when the guards left for their meal, Ethan dared to step closer to her cell. He bent as if to adjust a cable, then looked at her through the side of his visor. She quickly tapped her hand against the glass, 3 short taps, then a pause, then 2 more. Ethan's eyes widened. That was not random. It was a pattern, like a signal. She repeated it again and again until Ethan nodded, showing he understood. The moment felt strange, almost impossible. A silent prisoner and a simple human mechanic, speaking without words, creating a language of signs and signals. That night, back in his small workshop, Ethan scratched the symbols onto a piece of metal. He studied them under the weak glow of his lamp. The shapes were not meaningless. They carried weight, like warnings or instructions. He traced them again and again, wondering if they were pointing to something hidden, something her people refused to admit. He thought about the way the guards laughed when they looked at her. They believed she had been silenced for lies. But Ethan was beginning to believe the opposite. He saw no lie in her eyes. He saw truth that had been buried, truth that was too dangerous for her rulers to allow. Days turned into weeks, and every time Ethan returned to the prison, the woman showed him more. Sometimes she drew symbols. Other times she tapped her hand against the glass in a steady rhythm. Slowly, Ethan began to understand pieces of her message. He realized she was speaking of something vast, something powerful that lay beneath the city. It was not only a danger to her people, but to others as well. Still, Ethan hesitated. He was only one man. What could he do against the rulers of her world? What if he was wrong, and she truly had deceived him? The thought made him uneasy. Yet whenever he looked into her eyes, all his doubts faded. There was no deception in them, only the desperate hope that anyone would finally listen. One evening, as he finished his repairs, Ethan caught a faint reflection on the glass of her cell. It was her face, calm yet filled with silent urgency. In that moment, he realized something had changed. He was no longer just a visitor or a worker passing through. He had become the one person she depended on. Ethan knew that if he walked away now, the truth she carried would die with her silence. And if her warnings were real, the cost would not only be hers, it would be everyone's. The air around him felt heavier as this thought settled in his chest. He did not know how or why, but he understood one thing clearly: her secret was not meant to stay hidden. And somehow, it had become his burden to. The woman in chains had chosen him, not with words, but with eyes that refused to look away. And Ethan, though still uncertain, could no longer turn away either. Ethan sat alone in his workshop. The symbols she had shown him spread across sheets of metal and scraps of old paper. His hands were rough with grease from the machines he fixed each day, but now they moved carefully, tracing every line she had drawn. He had begun to see patterns forming, like pieces of a puzzle slowly fitting together. Each symbol seemed to connect with the next, not just as pictures but as meaning. He saw circles within circles, arrows pointing downward, marks that looked like stars or suns. Together, they told a story, at least part of one. It spoke of something hidden deep below the city, something powerful, something her people wanted no one to know. The more he studied, the heavier his heart grew. If she was right, then the silence forced upon her was not punishment for lies. It was a cage built to hold back the truth, and if no one listened, that truth would vanish forever. The next time Ethan returned to the prison, he carried with him a small tool he had secretly built. It was a simple device, shaped like a small square, with wires running into a thin glass surface. It was not forbidden to bring tools, since he was a mechanic, but this one was different. It was his attempt at giving her something she had lost a way to be heard. When the guards stepped away for their usual break, Ethan crouched near her cell, pretending to check the power lines. Quietly, he placed the device near the edge of the glass. The woman's eyes widened as he pressed his finger to the panel, showing her how to use it. With her own hand, she touched the glass surface, and a faint glow appeared. The device did not create sound, but it translated touch into shapes of light. She drew a curve, and the glow copied it. She pressed dots, and they appeared like stars. For the first time since she had been silenced, her thoughts were no longer trapped. Ethan felt his throat tighten as he watched her eyes fill with something he had not seen before: hope. She worked quickly, her hand moving with urgency. On the glowing surface, she drew pictures that became clearer than any scratch marks on stone. He saw a great machine buried under layers of rock, its shape round and vast. He saw energy flowing into it, like rivers of fire. He saw cities above it, unaware of what rested beneath. And then he saw the last Imogen explosion that spread outward, swallowing everything. Ethan froze. His hands trembled as he realized what she was showing him. This was no simple warning. It was a vision of destruction. If what she claimed was true, her people had hidden a weapon, one strong enough to end countless lives. She looked at him with desperate eyes, pressing her hand to the glass again and again, as if to say, "Now you see. Now you understand." Ethan leaned closer, whispering so no one else could hear. "Why show me this? Why not them?" Her eyes softened, and she drew one last picture. It was small and simple, a human figure standing before the great machine, light shining around him. Ethan's breath caught. She was telling him that only he could make others believe. The guards returned, and Ethan quickly slid the device back into his pocket. He forced himself to focus on his repairs, though his mind was racing. All the while, she sat quietly, her face calm, but her gaze never leaving him. That night, Ethan could not close his eyes. Every time he tried, he saw the glowing images again, the hidden weapon, the cities above it, the destruction waiting to happen. He knew the choice before him was dangerous. If he ignored her, he could walk away and return to his ordinary life. But if he chose to believe, then he was stepping into something far greater than himself. Ethan looked around his small workshop, filled with broken machines and half-finished projects. For the first time, the work felt meaningless. Somewhere beneath the alien city lay a secret that could burn entire worlds. And he was the only one who had seen it. The silent prisoner had given him her truth, and now it belonged to him as much as to her. He realized then that his life would never be the same. The air inside the prison felt heavier than before. Ethan walked the long corridors with his tools, but his mind was far away. Every step echoed like a reminder of the choice he carried. The woman had shown him the truth, images of something buried, something dangerous, something her people wanted no one to know. And now that truth lived inside him, pressing on his chest with every breath. She sat in her corner as always, silent yet watchful. When she saw him, her eyes lit up in quiet recognition. She tapped her fingers against the glass wall in their shared rhythm, the secret pattern they had built together. Ethan answered with a small nod, though his face remained calm so the guards would not notice. But this day felt different. The guards were restless, their steps faster, their eyes sharper. It was as if they had sensed something was wrong. Ethan tried to keep his hands steady as he worked on a broken console, but he felt their gaze on his back. He wondered if they had seen him bring the small device, or if they had noticed how often his path passed too close to her cell. When the guards stepped away, the woman pressed her hand to the glass again, her eyes urging him to act. Ethan's heart raced. He knew she wanted freedom, a chance to escape and share her warning. But the walls were strong, the doors thick, and the halls filled with watchful eyes. Helping her would mean risking everything. Still, he leaned closer to the wall, whispering softly, "If I open this door, they will come for us. Are you ready for that?" She did not speak, but her look was answer enough. Her silence carried a weight heavier than words. Before Ethan could act, a sudden sound filled the corridor, an alarm, sharp and piercing. The guards rushed back, speaking quickly in their own language. They pointed toward Ethan, suspicion written on their faces. His heart sank. Somehow, they had discovered something. Maybe they had searched his workshop, or maybe they had noticed the device missing from their records. Whatever the reason, the guards now looked at him not as a visitor, but as someone untrusted. One of them ordered him to stop working. Ethan raised his hands slowly, showing his tools. "I was only fixing the console," he said, his voice steady though his pulse quickened. The woman behind the glass leaned forward, her eyes burning with urgency. She tapped her signal once, quick and sharp. Ethan understood at once. If he did nothing, if he let them take him away, the truth would remain buried. In that instant, he made his choice. While the guards were distracted by the alarm, Ethan pressed a hidden button on his tool case. A small spark leapt from the console, and the lights above flickered. The guards turned in surprise, shouting to each other. Ethan moved fast, sliding toward her cell door. His hands found the lock he had studied many times before. With a twist of his tool, the mechanism clicked, the door shifted open, and for the first time, the woman stepped out of the shadows. She was weak, her movements slow, but her eyes blazed with strength. Ethan steadied her arm as the alarms grew louder. The guards spun around, realizing what had happened. The two of them ran into the lower tunnels, their footsteps echoing against stone and metal. Ethan guided her through hidden paths he had memorized while working. The woman followed closely, her silence unbroken, but her grip on his hand firm. Behind them, the shouts of the guards grew distant, though never far enough. Ethan's lungs burned, but he pushed forward. For the first time, he was no longer only a mechanic. He was a carrier of truth, and she was the key to it. At last, they reached a dark passage where the sound of pursuit faded. Ethan pressed his back against the wall, catching his breath. The woman leaned against him, her shoulders trembling, but her eyes remained fixed on him with trust. In that quiet moment, Ethan realized there was no turning back. By freeing her, he had crossed a line that could never be erased. His world of tools and machines was gone. Ahead lay only uncertainty, danger, perhaps even betrayal. But deep inside, he felt something stronger than fear. For the first time, he was no longer alone in the fight. The night passed slowly, but neither the human teen nor the strange old alien woman spoke much. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, but it was heavy, like both were holding secrets too big to share yet. When the first light of dawn slipped through the cracks in the broken shelter, the teen finally noticed something unusual. Her hands, which had looked frail and wrinkled the day before, now seemed smoother, as if time itself had softened them. He blinked and rubbed his eyes, unsure if he was imagining it. She caught him staring and gave a faint smile, her eyes holding something sharp behind their calmness. "You are beginning to see, aren't you?" she whispered. The boy hesitated. He wanted to ask, but the weight of her tone stopped him. Instead, he nodded slightly, trying to hide his growing unease. Later that day, as they moved deeper into the ruined passageways of the station, strange markings appeared on the walls, shapes and symbols carved long ago. The boy touched one with his hand and felt warmth, almost like the wall itself remembered something. The woman stepped closer and placed her palm on the same mark. In that moment, her figure shifted slightly. For a brief second, she did not look like an old grandmother. She stood taller, her face sharper, her eyes glowing faintly with a light that was not human. Then it was gone, like a shadow fading in sunlight, The teen froze, heart racing. What was that?" he finally asked, his voice breaking the silence. The woman's gaze softened again, but she did not deny it. "What you saw," she said carefully, "is closer to my truth. But it is not yet time for you to know all of it. Not here." Confusion filled his mind, but also a strange sense of wonder. Who was she really? Why had she been hidden away in that lonely cell? Questions piled up, but the answers seemed too far. And still, something inside him whispered that the truth, when it came, would not only change how he saw her but how he saw himself. As they continued walking, they reached a wide chamber where broken machines lay scattered like sleeping giants. The air was colder here, and every sound echoed. The woman paused, listening carefully, as though she sensed something. "We are not alone," she murmured. The teen looked around, but saw nothing. Still, he felt it to an unseen presence, watching them from the shadows. He wanted to ask who or what it was, but before he could speak, she placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Stay close," she said firmly. "You may think you saved me, but in truth, you are the one who must be protected now." Her words sank deep into him, stirring both fear and curiosity. If she wasn't what she appeared to be, then why did she need him at all? And what danger was drawing nearer, step by step, hidden in the silence around them? The chamber felt alive with silence, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The boy stood very still, his eyes searching every shadow, while the old woman who no longer seemed so frail moved with slow certainty. Her steps were light, almost soundless, but there was a grace to them that did not belong to someone of her age. He could not stop watching her, the way her back was straighter, the way her eyes glowed softly whenever she glanced into the dark corners. "Something is waiting," she whispered, and though her voice was calm, it carried an edge of warning. The boy swallowed hard, unsure whether to be afraid of what might be out there or of her. He remembered the flicker of change he had seen in her before, the brief moment when her true form had slipped through. His heart pounded. She was no helpless prisoner. She was something far greater, and the thought both unsettled and fascinated him. They reached the far side of the chamber, where a broken archway led into another tunnel. Strange lights shimmered faintly across the stone, pulsing like a heartbeat. The boy hesitated, but she stepped forward with confidence, raising her hand toward the glow. As her fingers brushed the air, the light bent around her, almost as if it was responding to her presence. "Who are you really?" the boy finally asked, his voice trembling. "You don't move like an old woman. You don't even feel like one." She turned to him, and for the first time, she did not hide her expression. The calm mask dropped, and in its place came a quiet power that filled the room. Her eyes shone brighter, and the lines of age on her face smoothed away, revealing a glimpse of the figure she once was: regal, commanding, and undeniably otherworldly. "I was hidden," she said softly, "because they feared what I am. Not just a prisoner, not just a forgotten elder. I carry a name that once ruled beyond these walls." She looked directly into his eyes, and he felt the weight of centuries in her gaze. "And now, because you freed me, you are tied to my fate." The boy's chest tightened. He did not know whether to step back or move closer. His curiosity pulled him forward, even as fear whispered that he was stepping into something far larger than himself. "Why me?" he asked quietly. Her smile was faint, touched with sadness, but also with something like hope. "Because you were the only one who looked at me and saw more than weakness. You saw me when others refused to. That is rare among your kind. And now, what comes next cannot happen without you." The chamber's glow brightened suddenly, spilling across the broken machines and the carved walls. The boy shielded his eyes, but the woman did not flinch. She stepped into the light as though it belonged to her, and her form shimmered once again, becoming taller, younger, radiant with a strength that no disguise could hide. The boy gasped. She was no grandmother at all. She was a queen, an alien queen, hidden in chains, waiting for the right moment to rise again. And now, standing before him in her true form, she whispered a truth that sent a chill down his spine. "The world thinks I am gone, but with you here, the story begins again."